And we are live with the Philosophy of Art and Science podcast. Welcome back, everyone. As always, if you want to support this venture, you can holler at the newsletter, aksum.substack.com. That's aksum.substack.com. You can go to the Patreon at patreon.com/tawahado, patreon.com/TEWAHIDO. You could also join the channel directly. You could use super chats. People have done that in the past when we've gone live. There are many options to support. You could check it out in the description. In the meantime, today, our guest with us is a returning guest, my good brother, Jonathan. He was here about 6 months ago twice. The first time to discuss the Harper's letter and, in general, the ideas of free speech, because him and I were in the speech and debate community. We were sponsored university debaters. And at one point, Jonathan was indeed the president of that team. After that, he came back as a survivor of the plague going around. We won't say its name. We'll treat it like Voldemort so that the machine learning algorithms don't come after our rear ends. And today, we are continuing a subject I had brought a kind of retail investor on to discuss this a couple days ago. And now we could say Jonathan will bring on as a more political pundit, as a rhetorician, as a master of the English language, and at least one other. Welcome back to the show, Jonathan.
Appreciate it. Thank you for that. And I'm excited to be back. There's a lot going on. I enjoyed our last couple conversations a lot. So with everything that's been happening the past couple weeks, 2021 is shaping to be just as exciting as 2020, if not more. So
who says sequels were terrible?
Exactly. To me, this is when we were coming into the new year, I started to look at this as year one. 2020 was year zero, right? Everyone, well, not everyone. I guess this is probably a good time to segue into the discussion of the economy. What's happening with Wall Street bets is really interesting. There have been some figures put out about how during the pandemic, workers globally lost over $3 trillion. And in that same period, billionaires gained $3 trillion in wealth. So the
likes of Bezos and Elon Musk.
Right. So the gap is increasing again, which is something that was already happening. But, the pandemic has accelerated a lot of trends. And one of those has been the wealth gap, the divide between rich, poor, working class, and the billionaire class.
And is that restricted to the United States, the kind of figures you're looking at, or was it worldwide?
I believe those were global figures.
Mm-hmm. The reason I ask is I'm wondering if the different measures of a Japan, of a New Zealand, of an Australia, of a Sweden versus the United States makes any difference in that gap increasing.
Yeah, I'm sure there is. We have the highest concentration of billionaires of any country. So, if anything, I'm sure it's probably more magnified in the U.S. Even I think it was last year or the year before, Canada overtook the U.S. for the first time in median income. And so, we're still technically the richest country in the world in terms of our population and the amount of money we have, the most millionaires and billionaires. But it doesn't look as good for the middle down.
No.
There's many, 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 many other countries that are surpassing us in terms of what the middle down is provided. I think America is a great place to make money. I think it's a great place for the wealthy and the elite. But, it hasn't kept pace for the rest of us. And that's really what a lot of what's happening right now. I think people are getting tired of being bystanders in our economy and just getting, the short end of the stick. And so Wall Street bets and what's been happening with the stock market the last few days has been really interesting because we're entering a time now where, I think the Susie Ormans and the Dave Ramseys I think they were already outdated in the advice that they were giving people, and I think it was a lot of fear-based
What were they saying,
advice.
just for the sake of the audience?
Well, they're very anti-debt, right? This is your crowd that's like save every dollar. You know, some of the advice is practical. You know, don't buy that latte, whatever. But we're not participating in the economy, and every dollar saved loses value every single day. So we're really at a place where if you're a saver, you're a loser, and if you're a
Yeah.
trader or investor, you're a winner. And so people want, now I think more than ever, it's more accessible, but people are realizing holding on to my money is not going to protect me. It's just not going to be enough because the value of the dollar, the purchasing power of the dollar, you know, I'm sure you know this better than I do, has gone down tremendously over the last several decades. It continues to go down every day. More money gets printed, you know, every year. And what we're seeing right now, I think, with Wall Street bets and the activity that's happening on with a lot more retail traders getting involved, is just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, I see. We got a commenter, Eric Winters. Shout out to you. He says everything is fake anyway. The money, the politicians, the laws, the economy. I agree. And to your point, the Misesian analysis, right? Just from a economic analysis, not making any policy prescription, is that from the inception of the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913 to about 100 years later, it lost about 100% of its value in 2013, and that was
Mm-hmm.
8 years ago. Was the last
Right.
time I really looked at that figure. And so you have the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. You have the confiscation of gold in the 30s by FDR, and then finally you have good old tricky Dick Nixon in 1971, fully taking the United States off the gold standard. And a lot of people use pejoratives like gold bugs for people interested in that. And I don't necessarily, again, make any policy prescriptions in terms of, you know, gold should be the money versus Bitcoin versus stocks, whatever. But I know that the reason why people are so deep into the stock game in the first place is because, like you said, they can't just hold their money. Back in the days, with relatively few fluctuations, you can hold, you know, your bar of gold or your paper currency that's backed by some actual physical gold for a pretty long time. And saving is actually encouraged as one of the ways to make money. But as you said, with the fiat currency losing its value at all times, people are trying these.
Yeah, I
these
mean, it's
everywhere.
you know, with a lot of the investment advice, and again, the Susie Ormans and the Dave Ramseys, um, you know, money is a depreciating asset. They're telling people to hold on to money. They're cautioning them against, you know, getting a car or getting material possessions. But money is a depreciating asset. It's in that same class. I mean, it may not be losing value as fast, but you know, it the way, you know, one of the it's something that I've my mind has been up and up to a lot in the last few years. The person that sticks out in my mind is and I'm blanking on his name right now. Real estate Grant Cardone. Um, you know, I started hearing him talk about money, and it's completely different, right? He's the polar opposite of the Dave Ramseys and the Susie Ormans. He's, you know, he talks about how with as much money as he has and as he handles, he tries to go broke twice a year minimum.
That's so
Completely
funny.
broke. Completely broke. Why? Because it keeps pressure on him partially to stay hungry and to continue to build companies and assets and things that generate revenue and income. But it's also just a reminder, you know, to him, money is just like the bread that you have sitting on your refrigerator or sitting on your counter. It's going to mold. The longer it sits there, it's going to mold. And after a while, it's not the same thing that you bought in the first place. And money works the same way. If you're not using it, you are losing it because that money is depreciating every single day, every single year. And so it just doesn't make sense anymore. That strategy of I'm not saying that people should be spending frivolously and that they should be buying that $5 coffee. It's just that the traditional, hold your money, save every dollar you can so that you can eventually buy a house, which is another depreciating asset in most cases, or at a minimum, a liability, because most people who are buying a house are putting their life savings into it, which they'll
Mhm.
never see back.
Yeah,
And then
they're not, unless those people who like buy cash here and there. I have
Right.
a couple
Right.
people, like
But
family
even
and
then,
friends.
unless you're renting out that asset, it is a liability. You're paying property taxes on it every year. You're doing maintenance. It's a liability. And to me, it's one of the, at one point, I think there are still some advantages to being a homeowner. Don't get me wrong. But it's not what it was, just like a college degree isn't what it was. And so you have all these uh, trends, with debt, with home ownership, with college degrees, and the debt that they're bringing on, and all this traditional advice that is just really outdated. Um, what we're seeing with Wall Street bets is people trying to fight back and realizing that with the collective power of the internet, we can do some things to fight back against traditional institutions that we've never been able to do before. We can take on hedge funds if we come together and we decide that something is important enough. We can fight back against larger institutions because we have the power of collective action like we've never had it before. And the game is rigged. Robinhood, as well as several other retail trading accounts, shut down trading of GME, GameStop, AMC, and other stocks that they deemed too volatile, that they were, you know, the CEO of Robinhood went on the air and said that it wasn't a liquidity problem, which is what everyone was trying to back him up with. Hey, if the trades can't go through, it'll have a cascading effect that will create an economic crisis. None of it was true. They were purely doing it to save money for hedge funds, which they sell our trading information to give them an advantage in the first place. And so they're
It's
getting
it's a reminder not to take, like, one of the big Machiavellian insights is in politics, do not take people at face value. And it's so hard to ingrain that teaching. But Robin Hood, don't take them at value. Don't, just because it's called Robin Hood doesn't mean it is
well, and
acting as Robin Hood
that's an
and the Patriot
amazing
Act.
point that I do see our society struggling with a lot. We're taking so many things at face value. Twitter is all about face value, right? If an accusation is made, it's taken as truth. We don't have a process of deliberation in terms of the court of public opinion, not nearly enough at this point. Um, but at the same time, we're seeing the Wall Street bets is just one example. Uh, and what's funny is that when you try to deplatform things in the age of the internet, it only galvanizes the audience and the efforts around it, which is
The
why I
Barbara
say,
Streisand effect.
yeah, it's it's gotten a lot of people excited. I threw some money on a few of the stocks that were restricted, not because I necessarily think I'm going to make a ton of money. I have made a little bit of money over the past couple days. I threw, I think, $400 across a few different stocks. AMC. I didn't get into GameStop. AMC,
You using
Nokia.
Robinhood, or you have like Ameritrade or one of those other ones?
So I did buy one through Robinhood, but I've actually been using Cash App. And
Oh,
Cash App is a game changer. If you haven't looked into it for buying stocks or even buying Bitcoin, it's how I
yeah.
bought a few weeks ago. I bought my first, I made my first couple Bitcoin transactions on Cash App. They're making it so much easier, and the trend is only going to go in that direction, regardless of the talk of regulation and slowing down retail investors. I can only imagine that in the not too distant future, it's actually going to be easier and easier for people to participate in buying into stocks, private companies, which we already have some new deregulation around in the last few years. Even private companies that want to go to a public listing. I'm forgetting the name of it off the top of my head. I believe it's a Reg D raise. But we're seeing more and more deregulation around how companies raise money, how non-professional investors can get involved, and new platforms like Cash App that are making it easier than ever. I mean, you can go
I
onto
love
Cash App right now, buy Bitcoin pretty much instantly, and post trades that will go, that'll go into effect whenever the market opens next. But there's a lot of great discussion happening around right now, happening around this moment, and people just being fed up, and a lot of people just saying whether I win or lose or not, if I can throw a little bit of money at these stocks and it hurts hedge funds and it helps the people who got in first, in terms of the Wall Street bets people, I'm going to do it because I've gone my whole life, for a lot of people, I've gone my whole life paycheck to paycheck. My parents were paycheck to paycheck. I'm paycheck to paycheck right now. I'm not going to miss this $30 or this $50 or this $100 if it disappears. But if it leads to some systemic changes where hedge funds think twice about manipulating the stock market in certain ways, then I'm on board.
contextualize that just in case we have some people live here, and just in case
Yeah.
people don't understand the whole shorting and squeezing phenomenon.
Yeah, so I'll give
Very
a
briefly.
brief I'll give a brief simplified version of what it is. So basically, hedge funds and professional investors have this strategy called shorting, where they will go to the stock market, they will get a stock, but they'll borrow it, meaning that it's a lended stock that they have to, within a certain amount of time, pay back. Now, whether it's that specific stock that they took out or another share, the system has no way of recognizing it, and it doesn't matter as long as they get the stock back. So let's say you buy one share of, or lend or borrow one share of GameStop at $20. You turn around and you immediately sell that share of GameStop at $20, anticipating that the price is going to go down before you have to sell it back. And during that time when it's going down, you now have the opportunity to go buy that back from the open market at a lower price than you borrowed it at initially. So you take that $20 you just made, you go buy another stock at $10 when the price drops, and then you give that stock back. And so basically, you're borrowing a stock, waiting for the market to go down, and then putting that stock back by buying it at a lower price. What happened was that in Europe specifically, not in the US, but in Europe, hedge funds and investors have to disclose their shorts to the market if they're above a certain amount. So this is publicly available information. There's different sites. If you just Google, short selling interest, you'll see a bunch of sites pop up that give you the volume and recent transactions. Sometimes you have to pay for it, but some of it's free. And so people on Wall Street Bets, the guy who initially put in the $50,000 into GameStop back in 2019, knew that this was going to happen at some point, right? This is just something that traditional investors have been doing for a long time in terms of short selling. So he said, okay, at some point, GameStop's already pretty low, but the business is still operating. They're still functional. At some point in the not too distant future, the company's going to continue to struggle, and hedge funds are going to do what they've always done. They're going to swoop in, put in shorts, right? Borrow a bunch of the stock, sell it, and then buy it back at a lower price. So what he did is this thread started gathering momentum around, hey, this is going to happen. So let's start buying GameStop stock now. And then when when these hedge funds inevitably go and try to do the same strategy, we're going to get enough we're going to get enough momentum just making this a popular discussion. And that's what happened. It was a gamble, but it paid off. They got enough people to rally around GameStop that they literally drove up the price uh, just by getting a bunch of people, random retail investors, to buy it up.
From the
And
single digits to the 300s. Now it's
yep,
back down to the somewhere in the mid hundreds last I checked because of Robinhood's shady collaboration.
it's
Now,
I believe it's back up over 300 now. I believe
is
it's
it?
back. Yeah.
Dope, dope.
So and what's interesting is that what's called the short squeeze hasn't even really happened yet, because the loans, the stock that these hedge funds borrowed, aren't due yet. So they tried to stop the market for a couple days so that the prices would go back down so that they could buy back those stocks at a slightly lower amount. But those loans don't come into effect until this following week. I believe some of them started getting cashed in on Friday, but based on the amount that they had bought up, they had borrowed so much of GameStop stock. I think it was around, don't quote me on this, but I think it was around a little over 10% of the volume of the entire market. For them to buy that back, the market will only let them buy back a certain volume per day. So it's probably going to take them a full week to buy back all the stock that they borrowed. And that's going to happen over the course of this next week. So,
Which is why on Twitter, the Wall Street bets, the like logo or the face, the chairman, whatever he is, keeps saying hold the line, and people making all
yes.
these memes about it.
Yeah. So, basically, if we don't sell, if all the retail investors who bought don't sell this stock back, next week when the hedge funds have to start buying stock back, it's going to balloon up the price even more, and it's going to cause them to lose even more money. They've lost somewhere in the neighborhood of billions. The
So
main
yeah,
hedge
so
funds.
here's where the conspiracy theory comes in, right?
Sure.
So you've said they. Now we're really talking about this
We're
one
talking
company.
about one specific hedge fund, but they weren't the only ones who shorted it. They were just, I believe it's called Melvin Capital.
Yeah.
Uh,
The
based in
question is it possible that while there are a lot of people on the retail side, these individuals, right, that are not the non-professionals, the amateur investors or whatever, right? I feel like you still call them professionals because they're making money, but the non-hedge fund, the people who are most likely on Reddit is public. It's not like private. I think there's a private
right.
Discord, but it's pretty public. So is it possible that any competitors who are also big wigs, old money, New
Oh yeah,
York
of course. Because
money?
again, what they're saying is illegal is a There's a name for it. It's called a short squeeze. This isn't something that Reddit invented. They didn't do something out of the ordinary. It's a strategy. And I got into an argument with some people initially when the pullback happened and they shut down the markets. A lot of people said, "See, there's all these kids rushing to the market who have no idea what they're doing." And I had to inform them that no, we do know what we're doing. And this is, as many articles have talked about since, this is a strategy that other hedge funds have been using to prey on weaker hedge funds for a long time. Because again, they're just as much as the Reddit information is public, at least in Europe, there may be private channels where you can find this out for American hedge funds. But in Europe, all that information is public. If there is a large, high volume short sell going on, investors know about it. And if they think that the hand of that hedge fund that's short selling is weak, they counter that move by using their larger position in the market to buy up more stock than what the short sell is doing. And so what they're trying to say is this crazy new thing that that Reddit is doing that's highly illegal and there's collusion happening. It's a strategy that Wall Street and that hedge funds have been using for a long time. So there's nothing new about it. And I'm sure there are several hedge funds that saw the opportunity and said, yeah, we're not going to take these kids lightly. what they're doing is having a real impact on the market. So it's a question of adaptability. The Barstool Sports CEO has had some good discussion around this. It's adapt or die. The old guard who is saying, well, stock price needs to be based around traditional values such as, company profitability. That stuff has been bullshit for years. What they're talking about is not how stocks have been valued for a long time. It's based on market activity. And now that retail investors can create as much market activity as a traditional hedge fund, the game, now the public is in the game that before they were at the complete mercy of institutions of.
Yeah, it reminds me the C4SS, they re-upped this image now, and some of the Redditors used it, but they used to sell it on a t-shirt. I used to have one of them. It said, "Let the free market eat the rich."
Yep.
And it's funny because it's counterintuitive to the narrative you see, but it's interesting. People have talked a lot since the 2016 election about the kind of reversing of polarities and weird mix-up around the political divide. Now, on the one side, you see the centrists among Republicans and Democrats who seem to be on the side of Wall Street, no surprise. Yet on the side that's pro retail, pro individual in this regard, you see Mark Cuban, you see Jon Stewart, you see AOC, and you see Ted Cruz. And you're like, what do these people have in common? But it's a funny kind of realignment. Even within the culture, you see a lot of people that maybe aren't the most political correct in the language they use.
Going back to taking things at face value, right? This is the problem, is that the public has put people into categories based on face value of, well, they act a certain way, they talk a certain way. These must be their values, right? And it has nothing to do with a more nuanced discussion of, well, what is it really? What is it really that we believe in? What are the real values? We're just taking political correctness and a lot of other, I guess you could say liberal discussions of identity, of different things, and saying these two people couldn't possibly be friends, right? We've moved into this world where if you have differences of opinion, you're just not supposed to spend time around together. You're not supposed to associate with each other. And of course, there is some of that going on. AOC responded to Ted Cruz's attempted cosign and said, yeah, like, I'm totally willing to be bipartisan, but you were helping incite a rebellion a few weeks ago in which I could have been killed. So thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah, attempted murder charge.
Right. So, I think it's great. I think we're cutting through some of the semantic red tape. We're experiencing a moment, and Donald Trump is a part of this, where the pendulum is kind of swinging back in terms of, not that language is unimportant or that we shouldn't treat each other with respect, but more so that, we can have differences and still find middle ground on different issues. Bernie Sanders and Mark Cuban can support the People's Revolution and can support more of a free market, even though they seem like on the political scale, they're on opposite ends of the spectrum. I think we've gotten too caught up in categorizing everybody and trying to put them into buckets that don't really encompass the layers of identity and the layers of values that we have that sometimes are seemingly at odds with each other.
That's right. That's right. It's there are some people who have responded negatively against this, but it's a sort of populism that has a left wing and a right wing flavor to it. And the idea is, again, like you said, not to be inconsiderate, not to be indecent to people, but that when you're looking at your political priorities, it's in this case, and I think in others, there are a certain group of people, whatever their other positions are, they put the economic priorities of the working class, the middle class, and the class
There was a professor that
first.
posted something a few days ago on Twitter that was kind of related to this, and it seemed a little bit, almost risque or taboo what he said. But he was talking about Black liberation, the Black liberation movement, and about how, sex and sexual identity has been used as a distraction within the Black liberation movement. And that this obsession, more or less, with identity politics, and identity politics specifically based around sex, has distracted Black people from, and all people, from the fact that the greater threat that they're all facing is racism. That the reason that Black people are killed predominantly and discriminated against is not because of their sexual orientation, is not because of what religion they believe in, is not because of anything other than this system of control called racism that's been in effect and a dominant power structure within our society, and has been the largest evil and threat that we've faced as a community. I would say, regardless of whether you're Black or not, or considered Black, it is the greater evil that we need to rally around. And MLK, was one of the people who started to say that's, at the time, that was the biggest evil that he was fighting against. But when he was assassinated, he was moving towards, our economic situation, and the rich poor struggle is actually.
I read his Beyond Vietnam speech on his day last week.
Yeah, and so he started to move past even that to say that is a really, that is one of the biggest issues we're facing, but the biggest issue we're facing might actually be our economics, and how things are set up that do not allow for upward mobility, across communities, across racial lines. So I think, yeah, we've been in an era, at least in terms of, not just what's considered the liberal side of things, but across the board, identity politics has become such a large issue and such a large topic of discussion. At the same time, that's, I tend to agree that it has been a distraction in some ways to fragment, the same way that racism was designed to fragment our communities and fragment our support for one another. As we started to realize that collectively we need to take action against that, other issues started to pop up that seemed to dispel that movement, to where it was no, it wasn't that was forgotten, but there are so many movements now that people are fighting for, and rightfully so. There's violence happening within our communities that it's we're getting to a point where people have to decide, are we going to fight for everything, or are these other things really as much of an issue if we take care of this main issue, whether it's the economy or whether it's our fight against the complex of racism. I think we're seeing that people are realizing that, okay, maybe we've been misprioritizing what our true struggle is. Maybe we're not realizing, we're fighting against oppression, but are we doing it in a way that's actually splintering our different movements versus combining them?
Yeah, briefly, because it's Saturday, I see from Sub-Sahara, they're saying "Fukr Lebbe." They wrote to me in Hebrew and in Amharic, so shout out to them. It looks like Arabic as well. I don't read Arabic, but I read Hebrew and Amharic, so I'm gonna have to bless them with a little bit of Genesis. So Barashit bara Elohim et ha-shamayim wa et ha-eretz. That's in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth in Hebrew. So shout out to you, Sub-Sahara, and Shabbat Shalom. So yeah, it's interesting. I look at the before he passed away. Oh my God, his name is passing me now. I believe his name was Michael something. He was closely related to the Jacobin folks, and he was on the Majority Report with Sam Sater. I'm forgetting his name. It's killing me now. But the general Marxist critique of war. I'm very anti-Marxist, but the Marxist critique of war comes from this material and economic concern separated from the ideologies. A lot of times the kind of big divide between Protestantism and then Catholicism and Orthodoxy is that in Protestantism, they try to put the whole of the faith on just the thoughts you have in your head, as opposed to the tangible actions it's related to, which is a big contribution of Catholicism and Orthodoxy and the Church of the East. We see that in a domestic economic analysis in the Black community. People like Killer Mike, Father Amda Hamilton, who have one of the elders here in LA, who was part of the Watts Prophets, the precursor to hip hop. He also started the first Ethiopian Orthodox Church, and he grew up Black Catholic. There's also Nipsey Hussle, God rest his soul. This is like the anniversary of Kobe's passing and Nipsey Hussle's passing. So obviously, as Los Angelinos, we remember these people. And Nipsey and Killer Mike and Father Amda Hamilton, they're in the position and the tradition of George Washington Carver, who believed in this is economic emancipation. In general, the conscious community, sometimes pejoratively called, hotepery, gets accused of this. It's not a new argument that you said this professor is making. They've made some of those before, and it's the Democratic Party controls, or you could say progressives or liberals control the presidency, the House of Representatives, and the Senate. And so now that there's no scapegoat of Donald Trump to put the community woes away and send over so it lands in the Book of Enoch to with some other angels, now we have to deal with each other. And it's going to be very fascinating to see, because the way you described it, I wonder, and I'm concerned partially, do you think these factions will agree to focus on economic priorities, or that they're going to begin fracturing? Like, how do you see the next 2 years falling out under President?
Well, again, I see Wall Street bets. The internet is anonymization isn't all bad on the internet, right? We tend to focus on the negativity, how it empowers, especially on Twitter, people towards argument and conflict that they would not normally engage in real life. But it works both ways. And this is, shout out to Uncle Gary V. We got to shout him out as much as possible, because he's been one of the biggest influences, I think, in most of our lives, who are now coalescing around the empowerment through social media and just creating our own platforms. He's been a huge influence.
This is Gary V. This whole thing is Gary V.
This is, I mean, he's the OG. He's the OG. He's the current king. I mean, he's producing an ungodly amount of content and context around so many different things. But it's Wall Street bets. There were discussions that I saw happening about how people were so happy that they could take part in something together without having, without allowing their differences to bring them down. How many people in the Wall Street bets community and people who have got involved in trading over the last few days are from completely different sides of the spectrum, politically, socially? There's so many differences among the people who are involved in this moment right now, and no one cares. That discussion isn't happening because it's an anonymous community for the most part, right? There's just a single discussion happening around, hey, we have an opportunity and a moment where we can fight back against the hedge funds and through traditional systems of control that have dominated our economy. Let's do it. It's not like, well, wait, how many of you were from this background? How many of you supported the Democrats? Who's for the... No, that discussion isn't happening at all because of the power of anonymity. Those people, everyone on that thread, if they were all to get together in a rally in real life, may not associate with one another, may not be interested in taking part in that same movement if it was a physical movement. And so there's there's so much demonization of the internet and social media and what it's doing to our society. But this is one of those moments where you have to shout out that it's only through the power of the internet, it's only through the power of anonymity that we were able to create this giant rallying call around fighting the man, fighting the suits, the corporations, uh, and it's been happening pretty successfully. And again, to me, this one small win is and the response to it to try to suppress it is going to galvanize people to continue to come together. Wall Street Bets had to shut down temporarily because they got such a large influx of new members. I think the community went from a couple 100,000 to now 2 or 3 million in the past few days. So it's awesome. I'm excited about it. I talked to another mutual friend of ours who's been on that thread, who was an early Bitcoin adopter, who bought Bitcoin around $20, started buying Bitcoin when it was around $20, and now, not surprisingly, he was involved in the Wall Street Bets community, and he said his portfolio in 2020 was up 6,000% in 2020. So you can only
I didn't know who you
imagine.
were talking about at first, but now I think I do.
I think you do. I think you do. We'll keep him anonymous. I don't think he
Look
likes
at you
being
gendering this person.
publicly discussed. But yeah, it's awesome. And so the rules of the game are changing. They fucked up when they gave us the internet. They fucked up when they gave us the internet because there's, it's something that cannot be contained or controlled. It's an
So talk
exponential
about that, though,
technology.
because you're talking about this movement that uses the digital space, these children of the internet that are coming together from all sorts of background using anonymity to work together for common goals. But that's a organic, decentralized movement outside of institutions. What I was trying to get you to talk about was, well, how does that relate to the people who like the more top-down measures and who like it to come from executive order, who like it to come from legislation, who like it to come from legislation from the bench?
I mean, again, to your comment earlier, or to whoever commented earlier about, everything being fake. If you look at my Twitter bio, and someone misunderstood this the other day, but I say that politics is WWE for the most part. And I think, it's George Carlin said it best back in the day. He had many amazing insights. Rest in peace as well.
Prolific.
But he said it's a big club and you ain't in it. And that's really what it comes down to. It's becoming more and more obvious, right? You see what are considered political political or dynasties of power that are supposed to be enemies interacting with each other on a friendly basis. You saw the long-standing relationship between the Trumps and the Clintons. You now also have a long-standing relationship between the Bushes and the Obamas. George Bush and Michelle Obama's friendship that makes a lot of people uncomfortable. The whole him passing her candy during whatever, the
And
inauguration.
Ellen caught that smoke too.
Ellen as well. Which again, it's, to me, it's not even about like, are these people evil or what are their intentions? It's just a glimpse into the fact that more likely than not, more of the people at the top are supporting each other than working against each other. And we need to do that from the bottom up. I don't think anybody's coming to save us. I don't have any, I'm not going to say I don't have any faith in our government or in our leadership. I think there are members of the resistance within. But if you saw Game of Thrones and you think that that's a far-fetched, fantastic version of how power really works, it's probably closer than anything, and any other example out there. I think, there are factions and there are some competing interests at the top, but it's musical chairs to me. It's WWE. There are no heroes and villains at the top. It's, it's the system, and some people are within the resistance at the top, but for the most part, I think it's just political theater.
Yeah, it's so funny that you said it's WWE. I grew up on WWE, and so maybe that's why I'm so interested in politics, is because I love WWE. And then growing up, from when I was 5 years old, I saw this man in a giant red and black suit with a mask choke slamming his alleged brother, and I
Mm-hmm.
said, "Man, this guy's awesome." And now he's the mayor of a small town in Tennessee. That's Glenn Kane Jacobs. And
Yeah.
so there's crossover between the WWE and politics. Donald
Oh,
Trump,
for sure.
who's out now. My mom saw this video. She's so funny, and classic immigrant story. Even though she's been here for decades, she saw this video of Trump jumping on Vince McMahon and just beating him down, and she was like, "Oh my God, this savage is our president!" And I was dying. She thought it was real.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think that was great training for his political career. And I'm switching from headphones. Let me know if the audio is okay.
It's good. It's good.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, WWE is probably amazing training for a political career. I mean, it's to me, it's a big show. The discussions and the arguments that we're seeing in public don't compare to the way that decisions are being put together behind closed doors. Um, and I think more people are just getting fed up and realizing, one, that they haven't had as much agency as they like to believe for a long time, but also that we're getting to the point where our agency, uh, you know, is growing exponentially in terms of what people can do through collective action. That's always been the way that we've been able to get things done. And I'd say there's very little that's been top down in terms of, you know, shifting the way our society works. I think most of the time, if you look through history and those changes, especially more recently, it's been grassroots approaches that have garnered enough public support that they've forced the hand politically of those at the top versus them saying, you know what, I'm a benevolent ruler. I'm going to come down and meet the people at their level and give them what they need. Um, so I know we're a little all over the place, but one thing I wanted to circle back on was actually something going back to Wall Street bets and why we need bottom up versus top down. I don't know if you're familiar with something called the Cantillon effect.
No, tell me about it.
So the Cantillon effect basically says that when you get new money into the system, it matters the direct. It's an argument against trickle down. It's literally arguing that trickle down doesn't work because the direction that money flows matters. Basically, if
That's the microloan theory. Like, I think when we were on speech and debate, one of the
yes,
topics we used to talk about is microloans to women in Africa.
yeah, so basically in the Cantillon effect, where money hits first matters a lot. So if you get a new dispersal of money, let's say nobody else knows about it, right? Let's say you, Henok, you get dropped into a society, right? Everything's cool, everything's chill, and all of a sudden you get gifted $1 million. It comes from outside of the society that you're in. Nobody knows you have that money, right? And you go out and you start buying stuff. You buy yourself a house, you buy yourself a car, maybe you buy a business, some real estate, whatever. And in the short term, that gives you a huge advantage because there's new money in the system, but because nobody knows that, the price of things hasn't changed. But as that money flows into the system, right, and there's more currency available, the buying power of currency overall goes down. And so everybody who didn't get that money first, even though even the company that you bought the house from, even the company that you bought the car from, the cost of everything for them goes up after those transactions. And for everybody, as it trickles down, that money doesn't have the same impact as it reaches people towards the bottom, because it's simultaneously driving up the price of things and the purchasing power of each individual dollar down. And so that's a very basic explanation of it. But it's just an argument for why things like quantitative easing and all these different measures that the Fed and that our current economic system has taken to put money into the hands of banks and businesses first is actually not effective for the economy at large. And given that the economy sits in a consumer-based economy, if consumers fail, the economy fails. Right? In a consumer-based economy, if consumers are failing, the economy will eventually fail based on the success or the failure of the consumer. And so, we're struggling with getting $2,000 checks, but the obscene amounts of money that has been given out, not just to businesses through PPP loans, but also to banks in the first, I think, 3-4 months of 2020, more money was given out to the banks than was in the entirety of the aftermath of the 2-3 years following the 2008 crisis.
Yeah, it's criminal. Peter Schiff talked about it on the Joe Rogan Experience. He talked about how he actually turned down the money, but that he could have easily gotten some of that money for his firm.
Oh yeah, and again, the problem isn't just that they're holding on to it and that it's taking, that trickle down isn't happening, right? Businesses aren't hiring people back at the same rate. Banks aren't lending out money at the same rate. And so this money isn't being recirculated into the economy. It's just sitting there at the top, right? They're hoarding these emergency funds. And so even if you were to say, well, the impact on consumers might be smaller as that money trickles down, well, it's not trickling at all. It's not trickling down. It's staying concentrated at the top, and the banks aren't putting those funds back out for people to use them. So there's a bigger and bigger argument being made by professional economists that's saying we should be putting money back into the hands of people. They should be getting it first. They should be the ones putting it back into businesses based on who's providing consumers with the best deal and the best options. And that's really a free market. Like, we like to talk so much about socialism and it gets such a bad rap, but there's so much socialism happening at the top, right? Subsidies, bailouts, loans, all these things are happening at the top, and we're acting like we don't live in a socialist state. We do. We live in a corporate socialist state versus a consumer socialist state.
Yeah, I just looked it up. It's like, depending on your bracket, it's like 0 to 10K, 10K to 14K, and like 14K to 22K, whatever.
Yeah.
It's complicated, but I think, before we go all yang gang, which is certainly a possibility, and certainly I would say better than the status quo, it would be interesting to see something like, what if everyone who made, I don't know, whatever it may be, the median income, 40K and less a year, you don't need any occupational license, and you don't need to pay
I
any
think I
federal
lost you.
income tax. Jonathan, you still there? I think Jonathan headed out. While we see if he's able to make it back in, I see a few of you all are still on the chat. If y'all have any questions, maybe we can pursue. If he has to dip, I'll give him a minute or two to try to get back. But if you have any questions that we could cover while he gets back, feel free to cover them in. you could just throw the questions in. You don't have to worry about a super chat, but obviously super chats are always welcome too. We also got the super stickers that you could play with just if you want to be silly. He probably ran out of battery. I think he was on his phone. Whenever I'm on my phone, the video chats go pretty quickly to draining the batteries. So I'll give you all about 30 seconds to a minute to ask any final questions if you want me hit any of the topics we're on. Oh, there he is. He's back. He's
Okay,
back.
I'm back. Technical
He's
difficulties.
back. Was it your phone battery?
No, I don't know what happened. It just someone tried to call me and it disconnected the stream.
Oh yeah, it happens.
All right. So yeah. So where were we?
I think we were talking about. So what I was saying is, an alternative to the Yang Gang that I would like is, and this is just a policy like pontification. If whatever the medium income is, like if it's 40K and less, what if everyone 40K and less, you don't need an occupational license and you don't need income tax on the federal level? I say that because California has a high income tax, federal government has a high income tax, and I live in South Los Angeles where I see a lot of the police harassing a lot of Latino community, selling the little corn on the cob with the spices on it and the candies and the fruit you see on the corners. And for me, those are the type of people that if you genuinely believe in whatever the spirit of capitalism or entrepreneurship, all these things, let them live, bro. Just let them live. Let them do their thing. I don't know why the oligarchical bureaucracy needs to incorporate these people and harass these people. And I think that a lot of people would choose self-employment, even if it meant less money, if it meant this sort of dignity and freedom to keep what you make.
Well, we're moving into an age where having a job is, right now, so many people are unemployed, but even pre-pandemic, having a job did not mean the security. I'm sure you have it, but my parents are still like, when are you going to get like a secure job? It's not, that job. I'm not going to say it doesn't exist completely, but it's not. We're seeing employers shrink, shrink benefits, shrink wages, and we're seeing companies shrink like crazy. Part of it's due to automation, but part of it is just greed and this, shareholder profits above everything approach that we've been fooled into following as the standard for the economy. Simon Sinek said something the other day that I thought was really interesting. That again shouldn't seem like that weird of a statement, but it's like, whoa, because of the way that our brains are trained to think about businesses and the economy and profit, it was kind of out of the ordinary. And he just said, look, a business does not exist to make profit. That's a byproduct, right? We're focusing on it as the product. It's not, right? The function of any business should not be to make the money, should be a byproduct of it, and having a profitable business. No one's saying anything against that, but is that the mission of the business? The mission is purely to make money. I mean, it is for hedge funds, but for most businesses, it's it's to make the best hot dog. It's to make
That's right.
to make the best sofa.
The I Dream of Sushi doc on Netflix with the Japanese craftsman is the epitome of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Yes.
The Shokunin.
Yes. That's a fantastic example. But it's because it's so rare, right? When we think about business, especially in the context of America, it's all based around the shareholders. It's all based around maximizing profit. And, again, this is something that Gary Vaynerchuk talks about a lot, which I think people misconstrue when they haven't spent too much time listening or looking at his material. He talks about people being entrepreneurs and making money, but insofar as what you're doing is something that you actually want to do. If it's purely money based, then you're going to burn out. You're going to find a reason to quit. and it's not going to be any different from having a job. And so we're lucky, I think, that we live in a time and that we're being forced to be more creative and to solve our own problems. Um, it's getting back to the localization of our own individual economies is something that needs to be a much bigger discussion. Uh, you know, the industrialization of everything drove us apart and and divorced us from the means of production. Technology is reversing that trend. Technology is allowing us to put industrialization in our pocket. So if you want to, have your own backyard garden, technology will help you do that. If you want to have your own garden in your kitchen, set up on your windowsill, there's technology that's allowing us to do more things for ourselves. If you want to sell things from your garden, technology is allowing us to do that, right? If you want to sell direct to consumer via Instagram or Facebook or Snapchat or even via text messaging, technology is allowing us to do that. One thing that's really cool, mentioning the micro entrepreneur, especially the food street vendors, and I don't think this license applies to them. I really wish it did. But one thing that has been cool that's been launched in the last few years is the cottage food license. I don't know if you're familiar.
I'm familiar with it in the cannabis industry.
So, cottage food license, something passed a few years ago, basically allows someone who wants to sell food products at a small scale, basically out of their home, at farmers markets, swap meets, etc. It has certain places where you don't have to have, you know, a health score, right? The ABC. Uh, you don't have to go through a lot of the regulation that a traditional license for selling food you would have to get. And I thought it was actually monetary, but it's not. It's actually not based on profit or how much money you make. There's no cap on it. It just has to be technically a home-based business.
Dude, it's so funny you said that. I've thought so many times of like, gosh, just doing that. Like, we have certain moonshine drinks in Ethiopian culture. We have a honey wine. We
Mm-hmm.
have teff, which is one of the ancient grains, and ancient grain is a move now. So the injera, our sourdough bread. Like, there's so many ideas I've had, or a little garden, like you said. One day, like that micro entrepreneurship of the gardening is beautiful, and it's funny because it has its basis in Ethiopian society and culture, but also American society. The whole Jeffersonian vision of America, slavery aside, which is a hard thing to put aside, but slavery aside, was the self-sustaining farmer. You know,
Yeah, and we have more ability to do that now than we ever have. If you want to grow your garden at home, you can get a soilless water tank. That's basically like it's got a base with about 5 gallons of water, and then it's got pods coming out of a singular column that's rising upwards. No soil, and you can plant your own vegetables purely using water, and you can grow up, a nice little mini garden, uh, just with that. And that's something that almost anyone can do, whether you have a studio apartment or an actual house with a backyard. There's a lot of restaurants in Los Angeles that are, Tender Greens, for example, has bought into this concept where they're using their roof space to grow a majority of their vegetables. And
brilliant.
and now you've got the freshest, most delicious, you know, getting any if you've seen any of the Master Chef type shows, or followed cooking, you know, in that respect, the best chefs and restaurants in the world, it's because of the freshness of their ingredients, right? They go down to a certain market or they go down to the docks at like 4 a.m. and they get first pick, and that stuff is made that same day. So that it's better in so many ways, and it's something that both restaurants and individual people are getting access to. But yeah, it's amazing to me what we have access to in terms of micro entrepreneurship now. It's something that my community has been doing on the streets for forever. But now it's something that everybody's getting swept up
Viva la
into.
raza.
Amen, amen. Viva la raza. It's something that everybody's getting swept into now, where, if you want to make candles, if you want to make, simple things, food. My sister had a friend or an acquaintance. She goes to Northridge. There was a kid selling chicken wings out of his dorm room that he was making on this mini deep fryer he had. He was selling chicken wings out of his dorm room on Snapchat, crushing it.
I love that.
Orders nonstop every day because there is no fried chicken spot, on campus or close
I
by.
love that. I love that. Me and some other people used to hustle the barber shop. I never did any fancy tapers or fades, but if you wanted a basic cut, I had you.
Right. And that's the thing, is that now you can advertise to your local community, right? You can engage with your local community and we can sell things to one another and keep the dollar. One of the things that Killer Mike talks about, keeping the dollar within your own community, right? You can talk about it as the black community, you know, whatever, but even just your local community, your friends and family, you can recirculate money within that community. And that's something that's super powerful, that leads to real economic empowerment. And it's not something that you have to do full time. If you decide that once a month you want to make some traditional dish that people don't have access to generally, you can advertise leading up to that and say, hey, this month on this day, I'm going to make 10 orders of this. Put in your orders now. People who have
I
been,
love that. Like a pop-up shop. I've
yeah,
seen those in the paleo community, pop-up restaurants.
right. But, it's something where, whether you want to sell candles or your art or, a 3D printed bracelet, which you can get 3D printers now for a couple $100. There's so
Really?
oh yeah, again, technology and the rate at which it's accelerating is almost forcing people to become entrepreneurs, because it's making their jobs less valuable, but it's also making the money that they have something that they can use to generate profit at a small scale. If you
That's
want
right.
to if you want to go and sell one sandwich, you can do that. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can go out, if you take your paycheck and you're like, man, I'm not making enough money. You can go take your paycheck. Let's say you have $100 left over from your paycheck. You just need to find something to put it into that you can sell for a larger amount than what you're putting into. All you're using is your time, right? If you can go get the ingredients for an amazing burger, you make a killer cheeseburger, it might cost you $20 or $30 to get together the ingredients for 10 amazing cheeseburgers. You sell each of those bad boys for $7, $8, maybe even $10. You probably have a community of people who will buy those from you because they're going to buy a cheeseburger anyway. And why not buy it from, the guy in my dorm room, or the gal around the corner, or whoever it is. Like, it's just, it's so much easier now to
Yeah, and
be.
if you know me and you're out in LA, I will support you. If you're doing anything like that, I will go out of my way. I'll probably pull up on you. I mean, it's better if you pull up on me, but I'll probably pull up on you to support you. J School account says blessings, fam. So blessings to J School account. David Lecklider says, what about a global currency, global central bank 2021? For me, that's an absolutely hell to the nah.
Yeah, I mean, there's, you know, you we brought up Killer Mike a couple times. He started a bank called Green. He's the co-founder of a bank
Yep, in
uh,
Atlanta.
called Greenwood, which, is referenced back to this historic uh, black community of businesses that was actually really successful, um, and it's completely different. It's challenging what traditional banking looks like. It's an internet bank. There's a few of them out there now, but it's reinvesting into the community. The profits that they're making, where they're going to.
Yeah.
Each month, I
My
believe.
girl Adis was on the show a couple episodes ago. She said she already has an account with them.
Nice. I'm still on the waiting list, but there's demand there. But yeah, people are starting their own banks, right? Like, why? To the person asking, what about centralized banks? What about starting our own bank? Like, we're at that point where we're getting closer to being able to be all the institutions that we've relied on. Instead of going out and putting your money in a bank, you can get a cryptocurrency wallet and be your own bank. There are places that will like there's a I'm blanking. There's a I think it's called BlockFi. Um, but there's a couple different platforms where if you have cryptocurrency, not all of it, but things like Bitcoin, you can park it there and they will pay you interest on that and they will let you lend against the value of your cryptocurrency. The way that a traditional bank would be able to borrow money based on the assets that they have from a larger bank. So there's ways that we can start to become our own financial institutions, right? Like, it's not just for the Rothschilds anymore. We can become the Rothschilds. We can create our own financial institutions.
I think Jay Electronica showed us that too.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There's plenty of examples. And I think, the excuses we're starting to run out of excuses, right? It's starting to become more of why not?
I
Why
like
why
that. I
why
like that. It's convicting.
I mean, it's something that I say for myself just as much as for anybody else. This is stuff that I'm trying to program myself with day in and day out. And that's why I like coming on to your show and having these types of conversations, because it's a space that stimulates these things out of me. But
Eso güey con huevos.
it's an incredible time that we're living in. We have more power than we've ever had. We just have to, we have to recognize that. We have to start living in that truth that we do have power, we do have agency, and we have more ability to bring down. Amazon's competitor isn't Walmart. Amazon's competitor is every Etsy, eBay, Snapchat, Instagram person selling whatever.
What is it? It's not Upwork, but there's one that name sounds like that. My girl just bought something off there or something recently.
Yeah, I mean, there's a new platform every day. That's what I'm talking about. Is that you can't shut the internet down, right? They can try to block one avenue, but it's the internet. You know what I'm saying? It's like whack-a-mole. You push one down, two more pop up, right? They can take down Reddit for all we care. There's a new platform every day for us to be able to take collective action on things and be able to come together as a community and say, we don't have to rely on the corporations anymore.
I like that. It's bright. It's our future. I think we covered a lot of great topics. And Jonathan, I'm excited to follow you along your journey as you make the parentals believers as well. What do you have to plug as we close up here?
What should I plug?
Minimum, I guess the Twitter handle. You could let them know where
I
to
mean,
see your straight thoughts.
the Rios Grande. That's my handle on all platforms, as far as I know. Other than that, man, I just want people to feel hopeful. Um, People need to keep fighting and to keep moving forward. I know a lot of us have been faced with challenges for the first time. We're in a generation where the things that we're seeing, the things that we're dealing with those things for the first time. We're not a generation that grew up with a lot of war and catastrophe around us. There was a, prolonged period of peace, you could say, or of non-tension. Because I'm very much, one of the last things I'll say, and I forget who this quote comes from, but to me, peace is not the absence of tension; it is the presence of justice, and that's what we're feeling right now. Is that we're moving towards a call for justice, financially, politically, in every way imaginable. People are calling for justice. They're not, it's not good enough anymore for us to just smooth things over. People don't just want to be comfortable in terms of, you know, it doesn't feel like the boat is moving around. People are like, I don't care how much the boat's moving. We're headed towards justice. I don't care how choppy the waters are. And that's, I think, something that I'm really excited for is that I think we're in a moment where people, are like, cool, we have nothing left to lose. You've showed us in every way that you're not for us in terms of the overall system. You've showed us that you're not for us economically, politically, in every way. And so we're not going to rely on you anymore because we don't need to. So if anything, that's the last thing I'll plug is that not necessarily self-reliance, because I think that's another great myth of America we've talked about before and how that's divided us. But the community,
Communal self-reliance.
people need to start forming community and supporting their community, whether it's your family, whether it's your church, whatever it is that you can come together with, where you can have each other's back, whether it's Wall Street bets. I think people are starting to realize that our traditional leadership, it's not where our power doesn't lie there. Our power lies in collective action. And so that's what we're here for in 2021 is power to the people.
Loyalty, loyalty, loyalty.